Listen to my words, nothing else. Breathe in, breathe out. By light of Apollo, by dark of Dionysus, guide this soul to the space in between. See the soul past its fragmented reflection. Show this soul to the red door. Breathe in, breathe out. By light of Apollo, by dark of Dionysus, guide this soul to the space in between. See the soul past its fragmented reflection. Show this soul to the red door. Breathe in, breathe out. By light of Apollo, by dark of Dionysus, guide this soul to the space in between. See this soul past its fragmented reflection. Show this soul to the red door. Do you see it? Good. 1, 2, 3, 4. Open the red door.
The program you are about to hear is fiction, science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction, fiction, fiction.
Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Hello.
Hi.
How are you? This is Sodia. Salutations, Cognonox. Welcome to Exofathom. I am your guide, Mike, and always I am joined with my two lovely co-guides, Nick and Ayla. How are y'all doing?
I am doing wonderful. I apologize for the fuck up because my computer is being absolutely retarded right now. So, but other than that, doing really good. Thanks.
I feel like it didn't mute some mics on the
Didn't.
intro.
No, it didn't mute the mics and it didn't show the intro. I heard it somehow through something, but did you guys even see it or no?
I heard it. I was scrolling through the notes.
Okay.
Yeah, I heard it, but I didn't have that window open.
So annoying. Okay, well.
What I did hear was during the music with the wonderful, fabulous wooden block action, I just hear Nick like, hello?
Yeah.
Hello? Hello? And I was like, oh no, who came through the red door? What entity is speaking to us now?
That was so bizarre.
For?
No, it wouldn't be an Exofathom episode without some technical issues. So there you
Technical
go.
demons.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, there's when we get into it, there's this idea that our brainwaves may interact with technology. This one writer had the idea behind it. This doctor who did most of who wrote this book on trances. It's like called From Magic to Meditation, From Magic to Technology, and he posits an idea that if you can use trances to manipulate tech, then that could open a whole new door. That could be like the next Edison type thing. So maybe that's what's happening. Maybe you're just interacting with this tech.
I don't like it. Can't control it, and it only happens to confusticate me. It never happens to help me. So.
Well, and what's hilarious is I feel like this is an Exofathom thing because your other show, I haven't noticed any
without a
like,
hitch.
Yeah.
Without a hitch.
But like our Collie episode, this
I know.
one, the
I know.
Randonautica.
It's really, I think it is my laptop that I use for this show. I think that's what's going on. So I might just have to switch everything up.
I was thrown for such a loop though with the new overlay, I guess, when you hit the live.
I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, I think I hit the StreamYard overlay for a second too, right?
Yeah.
Son of a bitch, I swear. All right.
What a magical journey we're all on.
Journey, yeah.
So Ayla, how's your Monday?
Oh, it's okay. You know, I'm deep into the physical therapy weeds right now with my knee, so it's just on the hour torture around the clock is what it is, which is odd. You know, it puts you in a weird frame of headspace. but it's a good day to talk about trances. I've been using different strategies to try to like fake my way through this whole situation. So we'll see. We'll see.
Well, fake your way through it, like
Like
not moving your leg when you should be moving your leg.
no, no. Just like, sitting with the pain, like the
Uh,
excruciating tears squeezed out of your eyeball pain. And lying to yourself, like, this is fine. This is fine. I got this. It's okay.
well, you're strong. You're making it through it, obviously.
I'm gonna learn some trance tips. Next thing you know, next week I'll be like, yeah, I was in this trance for 3 days and I was just bending my knee like
Oh
crazy.
God, what if you don't get out though? What if you're just stuck in the trance space forever?
I think during the next cold open or the next show opening, I might portal my way back through Nick's computer, which happens to be a teleportation device of some kind. I love it. I
You'll
love
be
it.
you'll be the one saying hello in the next episode. Hello.
Hello? Hello?
I hate my life.
Well, that kind of I guess guides me to this intro, kind of, I guess, or post intro. So tonight I want to talk about obviously trances, and I guess we could call these altered states of consciousness, right? So there's quite a bit to cover, I guess, and I guess too I didn't realize how much research has been done into this.
Hmm.
Um, it looks like just the amount of times the word is used and documented on Google from like the 1800s has doubled in the last 5 years, which
Oh,
is
wow.
kind of bizarre to me. There's also been a lot of research going on the science front. So a lot of oh god, neuroscientists. What's the word I'm looking for? Biopsychologists. A little bit.
Neurobiologist.
Yeah, neurobiologists are the word, but there's also like music ethnographers starting to take a look at this stuff, where it's to see the effects of audio drivers on the brain, see how
Hmm.
music actually can shape the way that we see the world, and if we're getting dropped into like a mini trance states, dissociative trance states as they call them, while the music's going on in the background. So I guess my first question to you is: have you ever felt like you've been in a trance before?
My life feels like a trance sometimes. Um, no, I mean, to be serious, yeah, I definitely do. I definitely do. I mean, aside from just being kind of a daydreamy person, music certainly helps get me into that mode. I remember doing lots of bike rides as a younger man, going for long distances, but just off of, like connecting to the music and kind of getting into that rhythmic motion of pedaling, and being able to utilize that as like a distraction from the gruelingness of it all. So yeah, I mean, music for sure has gotten me into those trance like states. And other stuff too. Meditation helps, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that there's probably levels of tranceness too, right? So maybe I'm just scratching the surface.
I would argue that maybe we're all living just one giant trance state throughout our whole lives, and it actually might be necessary in order just to function as a human being.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Ayla.
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. Because yeah, I mean, I don't think I've like formally been in a trance, but I have done like, I like guided meditations, and I feel like sometimes you can really, you just vibe with it, and you're totally in the moment, and you're just going with it. Um, and then I like Nick's point about like, you know, music and doing something and just kind of getting lost in like a repetitive motion. That feels a bit of a trance kind of state. And then I would also argue too, maybe in some ways, like falling in love is a bit of a trance because, like, I mean, I'm sure you'll get more into the, specifics about trances, but, you know, yeah, if you when you meet somebody and you're like enthralled and you don't want to see like any of the bad things. It's just like this, lovely halo is over the person. And you're just transfixed, or at least that's me. But
Oh,
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm a romantic, so I lend myself well to the daydreamy, romantic, trancey, like beginning of love, as Nick could attest to. But aside from that, I don't know.
have you ever been like, just like scrolling through Netflix forever, or like been lost in a movie?
Oh, you know what? Not so much. Like Nick scrolls a lot. He has a hard time picking movies. I love bad movies, so it's like really easy for me to pick anything. But you know what I have been doing lately is staring at the ceiling. And I just sit there, like, I don't know, I think ever since the accident, I've had a lot of time in bed, and, yeah, there're just some moments where it's like, you've already cried about it, you've already thought pretty much every thought about it, and you're just kind of numb, and you just give up and stare at the ceiling. That's like in a high pain situation. So, yeah, and I'll do that for, like, 20 minutes, and then, I get bored or, my dog comes in or something, but if that counts, then yeah, I've been
It
there.
might be meditative. As we get deeper into this topic, we you might find out that those guided meditations are closer to hypnosis events or hypnotic
Mm.
trances rather than meditative trances.
Ooh, but you
Which,
called it an event. That makes it so serious.
well, we're super serious on the show, so I had to up the bar on my vocabulary a little bit.
I'm for it.
Um, Speaking of being hypnotized, have either one of you ever been hypnotized?
No, but I would be willing to try. I think everybody thinks, oh, they can't do it to me. Uh, but I don't know. I mean, like, it would be interesting to see like how that mechanism works. I think it's a lot more subtle than what we see on like TV. I remember Six Flags used to have a hypnosis show back in the day. I saw one of those. Pardon me. And yeah, I just never got the idea of like of the concept of having somebody go on stage and then quack like a duck, at the, every time somebody said the word you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it seems a little bit fantastical, but I mean, I think that the subtle mechanisms probably are much more accurate and much more like real world useful.
They could be a little dangerous, but I think you're right. Like it's not so much like you gain closer to like NLP, right?
Mhm.
Like neuro linguistic programming of individuals. You can definitely create trigger sentences or trigger words. I don't know. I don't know if you can go full Manchurian candidate if somebody's that skilled. Like all of a sudden you utter something and they get locked in a hypnotic trance and start doing things that are outside of their normal ability, like completely outside of it. But it
Mhm.
is suggested within this book that we'll dive into a bit later that um, some of the added skills that you get by stepping into some of these disassociative states is that you get new abilities, new perceptions, and become slightly more sensitive to your environment than you were before.
Ooh.
Yeah, I
Is
can see
that
that. Yeah, go
and
ahead, Aaron.
that's all from hypnosis or trance too, or
It can be various states of trances. So there's turns out to be this idea of like a simple trance type thing where you repeat something to yourself and you repeat it over and over until you get yourself locked in there. And this kind of can be like meditation or anything like that. It's all internally stimulated. But then there are other ones that get deep within the disassociative state that are centered, like called like centric trances,
hmm.
where everything takes place on this we could call it a higher plane or a different dimension or what have you, but it's really just the disassociate itself, so like your subconscious pouring things out into your conscious mind and then your ego manipulating them in different ways.
It's
Oh.
like hacking into the substrate of the mind.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it's very important that it's not important, but it can be dangerous allowing external stimuli into the system because you're
Hmm.
kind of
Ooh.
at a vulnerable state. Um,
Yeah.
so I guess I could start with the definition, and then we'll work our
Well,
way into. Oh, go for it.
well, quick question. The hypnosis question. Did you have a follow up if one of us did get hypnotized once?
Like a follow up question?
Yeah, like I just want to make sure we're not missing out any like
No, I
content.
mean we're gonna return to hypnosis soon.
Okay.
Um, I'm gonna start with a concrete example of like a TikTok game called Red Door, Yellow Door that kind of
Oh.
got pretty popular last year. Um, but we'll explore hypnotic trances, which are um, we have to set up something which talks about like cognitive loops for the most part, but they're trance loops that begin in the cognitive state, and then that gets perceived by the disassociative state of yourself, but it
Mm.
has external stimuli. And those external stimuli can nudge you in ways that can actually be pretty damaging if the person doesn't know what they're doing.
Whew.
Because
Scary.
you're playing with your subconscious. So I guess I should start with this definition. This yeah, it seems better. So this is the book that this kind of centers around is a book called Trance, From Magic to Technology, and it defines a simple trance as a state of mind being caused by cognitive loops, where a cognitive object, a thought, an image, a sound, or a intentional action repeats long enough to result in various sets of disabled cognitive functions. This is why it gets dangerous because you're not parts of your brain aren't lighting up in the same way they used to, or some of them aren't lighting up at all. Uh, he represents all trances, which includes sleep and watching television, as taking place on a disassociated trance plane. Call this your subconscious, if you will, where at least some cognitive functions, such as volition, are disabled or can be disabled, as we are typically see in the hypnotic trance. With this sort of definition, meditation, hypnosis, addictions, and charisma are all seen as being trance states. Make sense?
Mhm.
Sweet. So I'm going to jump back a bit and talk about red door, yellow door. Now that we have this working definition and this idea of hypnosis. So the red door, yellow door game, or the doors of the mind game, is just one in a long list of semi-supernatural games you can play. The origin of red door, yellow door is kind of murky, but it seems like it was around in like 1996 on the old like internet days of just forums. Sometimes it's called Black Door, White Door, and this game is typically played with two people, a guide, and a subject. And typically there are witnesses, but they're not really necessary. You can just do it with somebody else. And the rules are as follows: the guide sits on the floor with the subject's head resting in their lap. The subject lays prone with their arms raised towards the ceiling. The guide massages the subject's temples and chants red door, yellow door, any other color door until the subject is in a trance and their arms fall to the ground. Witnesses must remain silent, and only the guide and the subject speak throughout. Once entranced, the guide asks a series of questions about the room or rooms the subjects find themselves in. And then with that, there's this set of disclaimers, because it seems like been like fine enough, innocuous. That's the word I want to use. Seems innocuous enough, but there's some things that should be known. Um, you should immediately leave any room with clocks. Otherwise, the clocks will trap you.
Mhm.
Rooms or people with dark clothing are probably not good. Any place or clothing uh, with lighter colors is generally good. If you ever find yourself trapped in any place, force yourself to wake up or risk being stuck forever. If you die in this place, you die for real. So it's kind of like the Matrix, I guess.
Mm.
If you find people in rooms, avoid them. Even if they are wearing lighter colors, they may be evil and try to deceive you. If you encounter an old woman, leave. She may look like an old crone or a monster. Some have described her as decayed, and others have described her as, I guess, as described her to Momo. Don't ask me who Momo is. Don't wait around to see what form she takes, just leaves. Concrete rooms with holes are water rooms, and they will drown you. Leave the room immediately. If the guide can't wake up the subject, they should do whatever necessary to wake them up as soon as possible. And if you encounter a man in a suit, run. And then lastly, generally going up is better than going down. So if you have like walking in rooms with stairs, try not to go down. The point of the game, of course, is to kind of explore that. Try to explore your mind and sort of the, I guess, subconscious regions. But there's been some videos where like people are freaking out because they end up coming across repressed memories.
Mhm.
What do you think? Would you ever play this game?
It sounds like these people aren't traveling with their what was it called, their cosmic egg of protection.
Ah,
Yeah.
yes.
They don't seem to be traveling in the astral plane with that cosmic egg. So, tisk tisk, always bring your egg. And, but yeah, I mean, like it's all interesting stuff. Like there's definitely kind of reminds me of like light as a feather, stiff as a board, or other like sort of pseudo mystical games that children play. But it is interesting that we have like I don't know if this is all animals, but certainly it kind of reminds me of when you flip a shark upside down and they go catatonic. And so like I think there's just something like it kind of built in us to get into this weird like subconscious level, kind of like the basements of our mind, or maybe we're like activating the amygdala brain or something like that. But yeah, I mean, like it would be super sketchy to enter into the mindscape without defense, and I think that's where people can get really screwed up, because even if you're not traveling to another dimension, even if you're going inward into your mind, there's no telling what you'll find in there. And who knows, maybe there are other things inside your brain, and maybe they don't mean you well.
By other things, do you mean just like the
Other
damn?
entities.
Are
Other
they
entities. Yeah.
are they born? Do you make them, or is it like they're just legit other entities from other
I think they
places?
could probably inhabit your brain. I think that it's more than likely that like we've talked about in a prior episode about possession and all that stuff. I do believe that there's a possibility that certain people have a predisposition to inhabitation by psychic complexes or some sort of other entities. That kind of reminds me of like hauntings and stuff like that, and poltergeists, and most people say that it is in the head. So I mean, like, I think that it's quite possible that we have, and this is just me being an armchair physicist and psychiatrist. I do believe it's possible that perhaps complexes or complex sort of thought forms can create almost an entity other than yourself. Yeah. So.
Like the idea of like exploring your shadow, right?
Mhm.
Finding what lurks in there and doing that sort of Jungian shadow work is seeing what kind of entity you actually are, or unconsciously like repressing.
Mhm.
And I think this game might be a good way to explore that stuff if you're brave enough, or if you're with a good enough group of people that will wake you up, because you might end up stuck in a hypnotic trance that is not good for you at all.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, it would be interesting. I mean, and they do say guide, but it doesn't seem like the guide is very knowledgeable in guiding, So I think that that's one of the reasons too. We have things like shamanism and ceremony, that when people do go into those mental scapes, they have somebody doing something to bring them back,
yeah,
um,
and hopefully properly guiding them,
properly.
right?
Yeah, and properly guiding them. Yeah.
Because if you're in like a highly suggestible state like that, I mean, I could start planting monsters in that room, my own monsters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if I was the guide, I could start
Yeah.
dropping things in there that uh, end up becoming nightmare fuel for you, or making the experience just non-enjoyable.
Yeah, we did it for decades. It's called MK Ultra.
Yeah.
We're literally planting, monsters in people's heads.
Oh yeah. And then just seeing what happens to them. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Just for the fun, for the
yeah, why
lulls.
not? It's a Monday. You got to do something with your Monday, right?
Yeah, might as well psychically torture somebody.
Ayla, would you play this game?
I would need to see some firsthand reports to get a sense of the range of experiences first. Um, but I mean, if it was like with Nick, I might play it, with you guys. Well, I don't know about you, Mike. You might plant some demons, but I feel like Nick would be generally trustworthy. It's in his best interest not to drive me insane. So that would be okay. But this is reminding me of one of the it's not a meditation, it's like a thing that I listen to if I'm having a really hard time falling asleep, and I've probably talked about it before. It's a Brian Weiss guided experience, but it's a past life regression thing. Um and I mean, I couldn't definitively say like, "Oh, I these are my past lives because of it." But what I like is his voice is really soothing and really comforting. And it's just silly because he starts out being like, take a deep breath in. This is called yoga breathing. Like, he doesn't even explain breathing. He just says take one deep breath, and then he defines it as like yoga breathing, which always makes me laugh. But then it's the same thing where you're going down a set of staircases, and then you're going through like a beautiful garden, and then there's a mirror, and you look in the mirror, and there's these doorways. So it's that same idea where it's leading you down the basement corridors of your subconscious. I usually fall asleep before I even get to the staircase, which is why, again, I love it. But I get the sense that they would be very similar. And so that doesn't seem as spooky to me because I don't think I have any more demons in my subconscious. Like, I don't know. I mean, I might, but I haven't run into them yet. So I feel like I could do it. I could do it.
Cool. Just
Yeah.
as long as you're with trustworthy people. I mean,
Yeah.
that would be my advice, right? Because they're you might not have any demons, but somebody else might want to take their demons out of their head and put them into yours, or just
Could
sharing.
you
Sharing is caring.
imagine? I know. Could you imagine if that were possible?
You want
Like
to
a part
split a
of
demon?
me. Yeah. Well, part of me wonders if like that's what horror writers are about, right? Because like Stephen King, for example, a lot of his stories came from nightmares that he had. And so he creates something scary and then it scares millions of people who watch and read it. And I just wonder, like, yeah, like let's say you split a demon. Does that mean now you only have half a demon? Does Stephen King no longer have nightmares? Like that would be cool if that were the case, because that would be some spooky stuff. But
Right?
I don't know. I need to call up Stefan and
Maybe
see
it
what
might
he
be like
says.
transference. So like he gives a bunch of people a bunch of demons, and then they're out of his head. He doesn't have
Yeah, like
nightmares about it anymore.
right. Like wouldn't that be just crazy? Like I don't even know how I would feel because in the one way it gives hope to those that have constant chronic nightmares, but on the other hand, I would never watch a scary movie again.
That's why we share our traumas, right? And that's why people go to therapy to talk about their, emotional traumas and all of that stuff. It's in the hopes that by speaking it and sharing it with somebody else that it'll alleviate you somehow. So I don't see why there wouldn't be any reason that you couldn't share, psychic complexes such as maybe, subconscious demons with people.
Yeah. I mean, I just wonder though if it's more like a spreading thing than alleviating. You know,
Mm.
because
Well, yeah, like I was never scared of dolls until I watched a scary movie about dolls, and then I was like, "Oh shit, this is something I need to be terrified of now." Same with aliens. Like, you think about it, you're mostly fearless when you're a kid. You start to learn about what to be scared of, and that in a way can become its own demon if you let it.
oh yeah, oh this is not. So yeah, we're kind of I guess talking about some of these induction methods, right? In a different way, like the massaging of the temples, right? Getting to that um, hypnotic state to allow somebody to drop a demon in. I think we should explore that just a little bit.
Mhm.
So there's auditory. There's actually is a whole bunch of different ways. So you have auditory, and that's like the driving through, you know, the hearing of chanting, auditory storytelling, mantra singing, drumming, music, all that stuff. You can even consider, you know, entertainment as something that drives you to this state where some cognitive functions are disabled. Kinesthetic, driving through the sense of feeling and movement, like you were talking about, you know, doing this repetitive bike riding stuff.
Mhm.
It can also be, you know, brought in by dancing, storytelling by moving, mudras, embodying rituals, yoga, breath work, oxygen deprivation, sexual stimulation, just basically anything that is repetitive within that kinesthetic sphere. Uh, Visual driving through the sense of sight, visual storytelling, movies. I guess like kicks touches a little bit of the Stephen King stuff, right?
Mhm.
Cinema, theater, art, architecture, beauty, strobe lights, form constant symmetry. I believe on that lights and sounds episode we kind of talked about how a movie theater might be a nice little mind control box.
Mhm. Mhm.
Barred it with
Yeah.
these sounds, and you know the suspension of disbelief, which is obviously disabling some sort of cognitive function in your brain.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
even the Cognonaut on our screen right now, I designed it particularly to be stared at, and
yeah.
you know, like that's the type of stuff that I like, is stuff that you stare at and then you just kind of get lost in. Um, at least for visual, for me, anyways. Yeah.
What are we doing? What are we trying to
Exactly.
implant in our listeners' minds?
Right.
Yeah. For like the auditory driving stuff too, like the when you podcast, right? You kind of think for people, so you're kind of
Mhm.
inducing them into this strange trance-like state where you get to just suggest things and maybe
Especially
the
if you broadcast on NPR and talk in a particular cadence in order to lull the audience to a sort of stupor that will allow you to inject your bullshit ideas into their brains.
most poor people.
Damn.
Sorry, I had to. I was just thinking of
Damn. What did
Dury
NPR
Marbles.
ever do to you?
No, I was thinking of Dury Marbles from Parks and Recreation.
He's so brilliant with that. No, and I love when anytime he goes to like play jazz music, he's always like,
And now jazz plus jazz equals jazz.
Oh my god.
and his guests are always like, "Do people like jazz?" And then he's just like, "Who knows?" Or I don't know. He has like he's just that was one thing though. Like anytime I was I used to try to listen to NPR on the way to work a long time ago. And I just couldn't because of the stupid freaking jazz interjections. It's just so like, shut up. Like nobody's listening to this for the 2 minutes of jazz or 2 seconds of jazz in between. Like, why
Well,
jazz? Like
to let you know, when I listen to NPR, I only listen to it for the jazz. So
well,
There
you,
you go.
sir, are no longer my friend. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, like jazz is fine. It's just that they choose like elevator jazz, and it's just like you can't even appreciate a jazz song if it's not like 5 minutes long and there's like broken plates in it or something. Like it has to be chaotic at some point, and you just
maybe
can't have chaotic jazz.
maybe they're trying to dig their way into your subconscious. You know, instead of taking the stairs down, they're trying to take an elevator down and just inject you with those ideas.
Yeah, I mean the whole notion of elevator music does always give me pause, and I've derailed this conversation enough. I could go. I should do a whole exo bit just on my theories around elevator music, but
It's called
another day.
Muzak.
Music light.
Muzak.
Did you say music light?
Yeah.
That's good.
Again, pulling ourselves back to this. So, like, there's some visual drivers that can, you know, induce you into a trance state. Olfactory type driving via scent, through the scent of, you know, perfume, pheromones, incense, not incense, flowers, pollen, anything that can kind of stir a memory in your head. And the interesting thing with with breathing, with smelling, is that anything you smell, like those particles, those little molecules, directly touch your brain. So there's actually a physical connection there versus like tasting or versus any of your other sense, right? There's
That's
usually a
so
big
weird.
complex thing. Yeah.
This is why I do not have
Smelling is your
friends.
brain feeling things.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, exactly. Well, I was gonna say this is why I don't have friends who like fart all the time. You know, like in movies, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, Johnny's farting all the." Like, no, 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 no. If you fart near me, that is the last time we're hanging out. I do not want your butt particles on my brain. First of all,
Mhm.
that's disgusting. Second of all,
But you go into public bathrooms and you're fine with that? Or
if
do
it
No,
or the
smells, I
public
turn around.
bathrooms you go
do
into
not
are
go in
completely
public
great?
bathrooms.
Yeah.
This
God,
is
I don't.
COVID times. We don't use public bathrooms
I was
anymore.
just gonna say I don't remember the last time I was in a public bathroom.
It's
Oh
at
my
least 2 years ago.
Well, I still go into public bathrooms.
I
I was-
cannot remember. Good God.
No, it was probably when we went up for Christmas.
Oh, right. Like the one gas station we stopped at for like the
Mhm.
10-hour drive.
Yeah, one stop is all you need. Damn it.
God, you're the worst.
That's insane.
You know me, I'd be stopping all over the place. I'd stop for lunch. I'd stop for coffee.
Yeah,
I'd
you want to
stop
make a
for
whole
snacks.
ordeal of it. and
Not
I
an
wanna just
ordeal,
get
a
there.
journey. No, Nick. Oh God, he's just the
An
worst.
adventure.
Nope.
Nick's like, no,
No.
we're just going.
I've seen that stretch of California 100 times before. There's nothing there. It's not worth adventuring.
That's also like you at Disneyland. You just
Yes.
beeline for ride to ride to ride. There's no
Yeah.
like
Yes.
in the middle.
What am
part
I sitting
or
around
bathroom
for?
break.
So look, maybe I want to experience Anderson's pea soup. You ever think about that? I've always seen
Solvang
the
is only an
sign.
hour outside of LA. We cannot stop 1 hour outside of LA. Come on. It's ridiculous.
Man, we're just derailing this whole. Sorry, Mike.
No, you're not at all. You're just going on the little. These are the triggers. These are the tangents that you. Maybe I'm just lulling you into a trance myself.
I was
You
gonna
don't know.
say maybe I'm like resisting the trance of this episode about trances, and I'm derailing it because I'm like,
Well,
don't
your
get too
tone
deep.
does sound a little worried.
Yeah, I know it does, right?
So we'll move on to the next little piece, and we'll find a new way to derail it.
Yay!
Gustatory, get gastory, just eating stuff through your sense of taste and digestion. So this could be anything from fasting to herbs to hallucinogenics and drugs. Right? The intakes of food and beverage entails intra-body chemical reactions through digestion. Some infer that all food may be considered medicine or drugs and therefore contribute to the induction of a discernible psychophysical states. Trance states can also be obtained through eating, psychoactive drugs, any psychedelics, cannabis, ketamine, LSD, peyote, psilocybin mushrooms, Anuta mosquito mushrooms in the case of like berserkers, but we'll get into a bit later because there's this whole notion about battle trances as well. That's pretty interesting. DMT and MDMA. Probably though the most common psychoactive drug that we all take is caffeine, right?
Mhm.
And that definitely changes your mental state. Whether you're like me and you have to have a pot of coffee before you get out the door or just a cup. If you don't have that little bit of caffeine, you're probably not the nicest person to talk to, right?
Yeah. It's
And-
interesting. It seems like all humans do is in service to getting to that trance point. It's like we've basically created a society and evolved in order to find more ways to access that trance state.
Yep. And there are some good ones that we can use, right? Like flow states or just a trance state. And I know I use a lot of caffeine and music to induce my own, but there's like it can be quite meditative, but at other times it can be like you really do forget the world exists, and I do become a little bit more susceptible to like criticism, I guess, or a little bit more to external stimuli, which isn't fun. It can mess with your psyche a bit. But we'll probably keep touching on that later. There's also discipline induction methods. So, for example, meditation, yoga, that sort of stuff. There's also traumatic accidents, sleep deprivation, nitrogen narcissus. You go deep diving.
Mhm.
Fevers, sensory deprivation tank,
Narcosis.
narcosis. You calling
Yeah.
a narcissist? No, I'm just
No,
kidding.
nitrogen narcosis.
Cool. Thank you. Fever, use of sensory deprivation tanks, MK Ultra techniques or micro techniques, hypnosis, again, meditation or prayer. Um, there's these religious ecstatic states. Like certain sects of Christianity will start speaking in tongues and stuff. That's also considered a trance state. That actually, when ran through EEG machine, shows that there is parts of the brain that light up that are linked to non-voluntary behavior. So that gets a little bit closer to the possession stuff too, where maybe some of those actions and some of that tongue speaking is actually not voluntary at all or not made up, which I find kind of interesting.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Then we have naturally occurring dreams, lucid dreams, euphoria, ecstasy, general psychosis, which ends up becoming this thing called centric trances that have a lot of different trance generating loops in your disassociated state, in different disassociated states, or planes, as the writer will call it. Premonitions, out of body experiences, and channeling, which I think
Mhm.
is kind of like what I think of when I thought of the notion of like a trance, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Also, driving in a car
Oh,
for
yeah.
sure. Big time. It's funny actually while you're rifling all of that off. I'm like, dude, we hate being lucid.
Oh,
Like
no.
humans hate being like baseline. We don't want to be baseline
Oh,
ever. And
no,
even if
never.
you're straight edge, you're being straight edge to go higher than the baseline,
Yeah.
which is
Uh,
interesting.
you
Mm.
get caught up on your. It ends up being like an ego thing and how the ego resolve certain situations. So like that, that straight edge is like you're exerting control over your environment, I guess,
Hmm.
right? You're
Hmm.
exerting control over yourself, but
Yeah.
that's just making a stronger ego because you're lifting yourself above that baseline to make yourself better than people.
Yeah. It also becomes a reward for you to continue that sort of abstination.
Yeah.
Which
Um,
it's just bizarre, man. We need to be above the base level at all times.
I think it's I think of consciousness. I don't think we could, you know, I don't think we can exist without it. I mean, even our like common lifelong trances of like get an education, get a career, get a house, get a spouse, get some kids, get a
Become a
coffin,
louse.
become a
Mhm.
louse. Yeah. Turn to Dr. Seuss real quick.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to.
But those lifelong trances can be hard to break out of.
Mhm.
The 9 to 5 trance, I guess you could call it, which is completely fine to live in, but it's one of the very difficult trances to exit out of when you're, you know, say wanting to start up your own business, right? You
Mhm.
can't really run it the same way that you would work a 9 to 5 because businesses don't operate like that.
Yeah. Well, then my question is, where are we when we are in those states? Are we here? Like, because it would seem to me that we're physically here, obviously, but it would also seem that we're mentally somewhere else, at least partially.
You're It's a filtered version of you, right?
Mm.
Like you I don't know if you maybe with LSD or other psycho or other hallucinogenics, you might be able to at one moment use all of yourself for one thing, but it seems like what we do is filter different parts of ourself for that moment.
Mhm.
Whether it be internally stimulated, externally stimulated, starting in the conscious cognitive or the dissociative plane, we're always filtering ourselves for a particular moment. Because if
Mm.
we were just always completely quote unquote ourselves, like fully ourselves, we wouldn't be able to do anything. We might end up being stuck something on focusing on one thing and be like, oh, that's beautiful, and trying to like it would just be too much for your brain to operate under.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense.
Like if you're at work, you can't I mean, you probably can, but it might not make you the best worker. But you can't use the same cognitive functions that you do when you're at home watching Netflix, right? Or watching a TV show that you love to binge or whatever. Um, it has to be something different. But if you try to use both at the same time, you're not going to get anything done.
Yeah, that is fair. Yeah, it is. It's interesting to me because I guess you're kind of like the brain is going on autopilot to accomplish a task, or sometimes because then it's like, okay, so then what is focus? Focus is just being on the task at hand. But if you're focused, you can also be in a trance.
I
Like
would say focus is a trance.
is a trance, right? So is there anything that isn't a trance? I guess.
Probably not.
I mean, I guess not.
It's
Conversations are a trance, like basically anything that distracts you or doesn't distract you.
it's just
Nick's mind
life
is.
yeah. One
Mine's just a little
trance
gerbil
state.
in a fucking wheel right now.
All right, so I'm gonna go over 4 trance states that are talked about within this book. One being meditation trance, and then we'll get to like I guess battle trances and more like historical contexts or historical trances, because this has been going on since forever, since since the ancients. Talk about meditation trances, hypnotic trances, addictive trances, and then centric trances. And probably the simplest one to start off with is a meditation trance. And this trance state is by creating a loop within your cognitive brain with with a thought, right? If you're the type that likes positive affirmations or things like that, you think that to yourself and keep repeating it until you induce yourself into into a trance state. And these ones are typically very easy to break because all you have to do is break that one loop.
Yeah,
But
stop
you
saying the mantra.
Yes, exactly. But you have to be fairly careful without having any you can't have any external stimuli ideally. So if you've ever done any group meditation, you're all sitting there quietly meditating, and the person who's supposed to be leading the meditation stands up and says something to you, right? Whether it be a command or it be a suggestion, whatever. It breaks you, it shocks you a little bit, right? Because what's happening is that disassociated plane that you're creating with this repetitive thought that kind of becomes a feeling, that kind of becomes a trance. Yeah, that whole disassociated plane shuts down and falls apart. Right? This form of trance ends up being easily hijackable too, if someone is skilled enough to keep planting those sorts of suggestions into your brain. And this becomes instead now a meditative trance into a hypnotic trance. So this can even go as far as like guided meditation, not actually being meditation at all. And this may be why like shaman and other kind of that aesthetic class ends up doing their prayers and their meditation alone, far away from people.
Yeah, I've always kind of thought the same thing about like meditation and stuff. I can't do it with others around. I get too caught up on the I don't know, the energetic occupation. You know what I mean? Like I can feel the person there. And then I'm thinking about that person. You know what I mean? And then it's like I'm not thinking about emptying my mind. I'm thinking about that person. So yeah, I could definitely see where isolation is optimal.
Yeah, that disassociated state is no longer really functioning the right way, right? It's now focused on this other entity within your surrounding.
Yeah.
Whether or not they're watching you or like, why are you saying anything? Like all those thoughts that seem ordinary, but it's actually your disassociated self kind of sending things to your conscious mind. So your perception becomes a bit off.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Ayla, what do you think about because you're the one that likes guided meditation, huh?
I do, but not so much in group settings. I do, I've taken yoga classes where at the end of the yoga class, um, everybody lays down for shavasana, and every now and then you'll get a yoga teacher who likes to, go around the room, put lavender drops in everybody's hands, and you smell the lavender, and they read a poem and they play some nice music, and it's like a 10-minute shavasana. It feels really nice. Like I'm not trying to diss it, but I found it cool both ways, right? Like I usually am by myself, or I'll do guided meditation, and that feels fine. And for me, it's really helpful because I have a really overactive thinking mind, not like I'm, solving mathematics all day, but just like I'm always thinking about something random and like multiple things at the same time. So it's hard for me to get to a state of stillness um, if I'm constantly combating the thoughts. But if I have somebody like guiding me, I can just focus on them. And then that kind of brings me into that like quiet place. And then, with like the yoga class or whatnot, I think that's nice because, your body gets a good workout. You kind of get in your body in your present moment. And then in that sitting, it's kind of nice because I think everybody's been in the room for a good hour or so, or hour and a half. And so you get like this nice relaxed vibe that's permeating throughout the room. And so I think if everybody did yoga and then meditated, I'd be down. But if it was people just off the street meditating, that would be kind of like what Nick's saying, like too chaotic and too noisy for me.
Plebeians.
What?
No, I was just saying we don't want any plebeians around us. People off the street. What are you talking
what I
about?
mean? In the sense that, like, if somebody just got off work
I
and
know, I'm
they
teasing you.
jumped it. Oh, okay. I just want to make sure I was
Yeah.
clear. Like, I'm not. No, like, I don't care who I meditate with. I'm just saying that, like,
I care.
You do
It
care.
might be important.
It is important. You shouldn't meditate with just no randos.
I just don't like people in general, so I just meditate alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and it's funny to talk about people in like because I did have a friend who loved ecstatic dance, and so she dragged me to a couple of those. And have either of you been to one of these ecstatic?
Oh yeah, I go
dances?
every Thursday.
Michael.
See how ecstatic I am.
I just dance alone in my house like a madman. So does that
Nice.
count?
Sure. Yeah, I think it does. I mean, that's essentially what it is. It's just that you're with a group of people. And I think the first time I was really uncomfortable, but then you start looking around and you're like, oh, people are really like dancing all kinds of crazy stuff. All right, well, who cares? And then you just like let loose. But they'll go on for hours. And so it's, I don't know how much different that is from just going to a club with like better music.
Well, there's dance has been a part of trance, inducing for eons. You know?
We'll get into the main acts. It's a form of it was in worship to Dionysus, but there's some ecstatic dancing that went on with this particular group of priestesses. Yeah, it's all part of it. So like, it's interesting. So even for like you by yourself, that internal stimulation of just your thoughts is too much. You need that external stimuli of something or someone to focus on.
Yeah, I mean, it changes, I think. But just for the past year or so, it's like the minute I settle down to relax, I get like 6 text messages in a row. And I'm like, that could be a promotional text. That could be another person died. Like, I don't know. I could answer it, but I won't. Then I don't. Then I get a phone call or I get like an email ping, or at that point I'm suddenly noticing that like my neck hurts and I want to shift out of my position, but I don't shift. And then I start thinking to myself like, well, I should just check the text because I'm already distracted now. Then I'm like, oh shit, my vibe is off. And then, and so that's what happens with me is I just keep spinning out, because usually when I'm trying to meditate, it's like I haven't been doing it consistently. So I'm trying to jump back in, which is hard. So like Yeah, I think that's what I mean to say is I'm not doing it consistently, so it's harder for me. But when I do it consistently, it's easy to like click into it really quick, you know.
No, I gotcha. Just take that. Yeah, it can be that disassociated plane, like, oh, my vibe's off. Like those messages coming from your subconscious can definitely mess with you if you're trying to start the trance generating loop in your conscious mind.
Right. And it depends on like why you're doing it too. Like I said, if I'm usually doing it because I'm trying in a stress state and I'm trying to get out of it, that's different than if it's like a Tuesday and I woke up from a nap and gonna just have a nice little moment of solitude. Like the I think the reason you go into it makes a difference.
Oh, no, for sure. Or at least makes it harder or easier to get into. Right.
Absolutely.
So, because what I'm going to talk about next is hypnotic trances. They're trances that are generated by creating a loop in the cognitive plane. So, in your cognitive mind, the same as meditation. The only difference is that you have external stimuli that is perceived from the disassociated plane. So, for example, driving. You don't really have to, it's autopilot, right? You don't have to think about driving. I'm sure there's times where you've been driving and forgot you were driving and just got somewhere.
Yep.
And you're like, how
All the
hell?
time.
Yeah, how the hell did I get here?
Yeah.
So comforting, Nick.
Hey, I get us places, okay? Okay.
You really do. No, I love it. I love it. If we're only stopping one time, then I'll drive
I
1
don't eat
hour.
or drink. I fast the entire time too. It's a spiritual thing for me.
Oh, that's how
That's
we're
the first
framing
time
it
I ever
now.
heard that.
Yeah. There's nothing like driving through Merced that'll connect you to God. That's for sure.
And the gas pedal.
Yeah.
Nick's having this spiritual experience. Meanwhile, I'm like napping, eating some Cheetos, playing Legend of
video
Zelda on the
games,
Switch,
yeah. Uh-huh.
on Instagram when we go through Sacramento. Like, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Well,
we found our flow.
there you go. Perfect. Watching TV, hypnosis, listening to music. These are all forms of hypnotic trances. In general, these can be actually quite dangerous, and the environment in which they occur is not controlled. Right. If you're driving, you can't really hit that hypnotic trance if asteroids or aliens are invading us, or if something crazy is happening, like you're in the middle of a pileup or something like that. You have to dodge cars. You can't exactly hit that trance state. Right.
Yeah.
And this danger,
even when somebody puts their brakes on.
yeah, they stop short and they break you out. You get real angry.
Yep.
And this danger is due to the fact that some cognitive functions are disabled during, when the external forces are having their effect. So that suggestion of those brake lights can alter the trance forces, as they call them. So the forces that are actually the energetic forces that are happening to you. This is, in other words, it's like the energy generated from the changes that happen in cognitive function, whether you have the light on new cognitive functions or you're reducing them. These forces can have far-reaching effects when the intensity of the forces are high. Once fully understood, though, like how this whole hypnotic trance works, you can get people to do things against their will while in a hypnotic trance state. Like the quacking of a duck whenever you say certain triggers.
Or making a second pit stop.
Yeah, there you go. But it has to mean something, though. Right?
It means something to me, man.
Because if Ayla goes, I want to make a second pit stop, then that doesn't do anything for you. But if she's like, I really have to go to the bathroom, then it might, now you're causing pain onto her. Now you have to stop.
She's causing pain onto me. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can get him to stop if there's nobody breaking or disrupting his trance. But if I'm like, oh, didn't you want to get gas at the next exit, when he's like super calm and in his mode, then it'll happen.
You see, look at that, just introducing subtle suggestions.
Oh, yeah, man. I know
Very
what's
subtle.
up. I've been hypnotized, let me tell you.
Oh, there you go. I've had it offered to me one time, and I was on such guard at that point in my life that I was like, no. on guard from everyone. Like, absolutely not.
Oh,
Don't need
man.
somebody else other than me messing with my own subconscious.
Yeah. Well, I kind of like, yeah. I mean, mine was in a class, and the person doing it was a professor who has a bit notoriously evil. So like I remember I don't even know if he gave us the option not to be hypnotized. He just said he was going to show us what it was like. And so, and there's like, a couple hundred people in the class. And he was like saying only some people will really be hypnotized and others won't. And I remember this gap period. And then he said, if your hand is in the air, that means you're easily hypnotized. And then I looked, my right hand was in the air, and I was like, no, like, what happened? And I think that like anytime someone says, I'm going to offer you hypnosis, I think it should be recorded with timestamps, and that should be given to the patient, because it's really like just, it's unsettling to have those like breaks of time,
Yeah. But what if somebody works in the idea that you don't need those times, you don't need those recordings while you're under hypnosis?
Well, I would write a note to myself and say, Ayla, if they say that you don't need blah, 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 the second time, don't go back. Notarized
It's like
by
hiring
Ayla.
somebody to code your website, and then they won't give you the code.
Right.
Oh
right.
god.
You know?
They leave little back doors for themselves
Yeah,
to
exactly.
get into.
Yeah.
Awkward.
There's high amounts of trust that has to happen when you know, are under those like hypnosis. Yeah, I mean, I hardly trust myself with these tasks. So the next one I want to talk about is addictive trances. And these are trances in which the trance generating loop is created in the disassociated plane with an external stimuli in the disassociated plane, which is perceived also from the disassociated plane. But sometimes it can also be perceived in like the cognitive plane. Big into that. All addictions can kind of fit under like this umbrella. The main difference between this and like hypnotic trances is where the trance generating loop happens. So where some of your cognitive abilities are disabled. While in hypnotic trances, it's in the cognitive plane. So you're driving and you just start to turn off certain cognitive functions that you don't need. Right, you're kind of focused on the road. Versus this where it's kind of born in this nebulous place that can come from things like unrealized trauma, right? Unrealized, unresolved emotional trauma, for example. And these are kind of inner repetitive processes, which take place in a cognitively disabled state, you could call it, rather than disassociate it from yourself. Um, blah blah blah. These things can be stimulated or modulated by external triggers. And it says, like, for example, an alcoholic can have like the following trance-like structure. So the loop happens in a dissociated plane by a painful idea, memory, or hallucinated vision. And you're thinking about something awful, or you feel something awful, so you want to numb it by drinking. Denial of pain. So you start drinking, but the drinking actually brings back in the pain itself, along with also some of the, like the pleasurable and inebriating effects of alcohol, right? So it's your ego perceiving this totally nebulous thing and having a physical manifestation of it through the alcohol that makes you feel better. And that's how the two kind of connect. Um, Another example I like to think of is in How I Met Your Mother, where Lily has this shopaholic thing. Wherever she feels bad, she goes out and buys stuff, ends up running up a bunch of credit card debt. But the mere fact of trying to confront the idea of credit card debt makes her feel bad enough to want to go out and buy more things with credit cards.
Poor Lily.
Right? And it's an addictive trance. You're losing some of your cognitive ability. It's starting off in this nebulous subconscious part of your mind, It gets perceived there by your ego, and then it manifests itself physically through some action that might not be the best for you, but it becomes an addiction. And to undo that loop, you kind of have to dive into your subconscious, maybe through hypnosis or through meditation or other psychological type works, and kind of uh, deconstruct and confront some of those things that are actually causing the loop to be generated. Make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
Absolutely.
Do you have any addictions? No. Which is,
Yeah,
I think all humans, everybody's
yeah,
addicted to something, right?
absolutely. Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be, a physical addiction. It can be a mental addiction, all that type of stuff. Yeah,
Like I've
for
been
sure.
a big workaholic. Like I've put my nose to the grindstone to spite my face before,
Hmm.
and it's like you feel. For me, it was like feeling intellectually inadequate, so I have to do more work to feel intellectually adequate, but I don't at the end of the work. So then I begin more work.
Right, because you
Hmm.
end up over extenuating yourself, and then your work quality sort of slips after a little while, and then you feel bad about it, and then you work harder.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and you don't give your time like the rest, right? And it's that
right.
reinforcing loop that begins with this thing in the disassociated state of going, I'm not good enough or I am not smart enough,
Hmm.
right? So everybody's addicted to something. This is how I think, like you see, like bodybuilders, like you usually like talk to them and you figure out the root of why they started to go, working out like that, or even fighters too. And you find out like, some traumatic experience that got them to through this whole loop. So it's like a weird positive addiction, but nonetheless
Yeah.
still an addiction.
Oh yeah, and it's also body dysmorphia. A lot of those guys that have like muscles on top of muscles think that they look skinny and weak, you know,
Yeah.
and so they continue to build muscle. It's the same as like somebody who binges because they think that having a belly full of food makes them look fat.
Yeah. But you ready for me to move on to the last trance state,
Do it.
which
Hmm.
is seems to be more, I guess, kind of, yeah, very interesting. So these are called centric trances. It's trance in which there is an internal stimulation in the dissociative plane, perceived by the dissociative plane. Centric trances contain multiple dissociated trance planes, so multiple ideas that are working together, and only in some of which there are trance generating loops. Um, these are very complex trances and often generate very strong trance forces, like cults and things like that. Psychosis can be thought of as this style of trance. A loop in the dissociative plane means a type of self induced hypnosis is being created, in which the ego awareness is totally involved. It is a trance full of illusions, delusions, and hallucinations. Body awareness is at a minimum, and so may be compassion. Highly developed egos, driven individuals on a quote unquote mission, some type of visionaries, artists, self proclaimed messiahs, etc., are likely to be successful centric trances, in which the trance forces are so intense that they sweep up others in their trance by potentiating disassociated trance planes and constructive trance generating loops, often over long distances. More concrete examples of this are like movie stars, gurus, saints, and quote unquote male chauvinist pigs can all be thought of these centric types of trances. And of course, there are plenty of others. I like how you had to throw in the male chauvinist pigs in there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of it's interesting because it's like idea possession, you know. As somebody who daydreams a lot and somebody who kind of lives in my own head, I definitely understand like the sentiment. Um, it is interesting how it can become contagious. Somebody's delusion can become contagious. I think that that's really kind of interesting. Of course, you see this in cults and big, sort of populist figures. But yeah, I think there's something weird about that because it's like you're generating your little holographic brain is generating an illusion and the illusion is so strong that other people start believing in it.
X, you picked up the key word, belief.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and once you start to get people to believe in you, or even the illusion that you create, like with actors, right, actors and actresses,
Mm-hmm.
you have unlocked something that's very powerful. That suspension of disbelief, also the word belief again. But yeah, once it's so strong that you were actually creating trance loops in other people's brains for them to run on.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, especially when you break it down like that. Yeah, I mean, makes me want to go start a cult.
No, I don't need the notoriety, man.
Nah, of course not.
No, thank you.
But it makes me wonder, like, is it the lack of internal stimulation of other people that allows you, with your own internal stimulation, to become an external stimuli for themselves on that higher plane, for that disassociated plane, right?
Yeah,
Is like your abstract self, this illusionary self, you want to call it, or multiple selves, are now forcing your will through this abstracted sense onto somebody else, because they don't have this sort of internal stimulation happening either in their shadow or in their cognitive or in their conscience.
yeah. I also think that it's perhaps that these types of thought forms create a non-physical, maybe alternate dimension inertia or mass that can influence people in this dimension. So like if you're a cult leader and you think that you're going to bring upon the heaven on earth, expending so much, and especially if you're somebody who fixates, and usually people who are tend towards this type of stuff are on a borderline sort of personality anyways. I really think that what you're doing is you're dumping psychic energy into that thought, so much so that its mass starts to pull in other people's souls like a black hole, like, so if we could think of thoughts as like on the space-time continuum, the more energy you add to that thought, the more dense it becomes, and the more it drags people towards it.
You're like that whole idea of being on a mission, right?
Mm-hmm.
A mission is that sort of black hole. I find it interesting that it's both psychotics, pathologically minded people, and saints, because it implies that saints are pathologically minded people, which
Oh, yeah.
may be true, right? They've
Yeah.
just gone too far down the rabbit hole, but just on the other end of things.
Right. And this is a important sort of delineation, especially when we talk about trances. And I was thinking about this through the whole episode. It's like there are definitely positive trances and negative trances, and it seems like there's a sliding scale spectrum. Like bad TV will put you into a sort of negative trance. Social media tends to put you in a negative trance, whereas things like yoga and exercise and conversation and love tend to put you in a more positive trance.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. Right. And this notion of, like, you have the pickup artist, the charismatic, chauvinist pig, quote unquote. That's the same person as the visionary, right? The same exact trance work is being done, at least within this theory. Not like a theory, like a scientific theory, but just as an idea. But the same work is being done. It's just, like you said, on that spectrum. It just depends on what your mission is. All right. Then maybe we'll get into berserkers too in a bit, but maybe that might even be added to sort of these centric trances, because they're so unbelievably powerful that they pull you into that illusion completely, and hallucination completely, right?
Yeah, and it becomes very difficult to pull that person out. Whereas, we were talking about the other types of trances, which seem to be more easily halted. It seems that centric trances are much more ingrained. I mean, you think about trying to pull somebody out of a cult, and it takes days and days and days of deprogramming to get that person out of that trance.
Yeah, those and addictive trances or
Mm-hmm.
lifelong trances are extremely hard to terminate, and this is
Yeah.
due to having what do you call secondary loops. So for example, like a with alcoholics, like you have the loop of drinking, right? But if you don't really pay no mind to the other loop that's also happening of these sort of dissociative thoughts that are going on, this emotional trauma, you might very well end up going back and relapsing and drinking again. So you have to break down one loop at a time, whether it be the primary loop of drinking or the secondary loop of the trauma that has is not explored yet.
Mm-hmm.
And we find that true in psychology, right? And it seems like generally the best we can do with these secondary loops is replace them with another one. So AA does this. So instead of drinking all the time, you find yourself in a religious loop, which
Mm-hmm.
might be better for you, but may not, it doesn't actually fix the problem of the unexplored trauma.
Yeah. Right.
Hmm.
But you're spot on with these types of loops are incredibly difficult to break. I mean, think about how many like actors, like method actors, end up getting completely wrecked by their character, right?
Mm-hmm.
It takes years sometimes to pull, or sometimes not even. They don't ever pull them out, right?
Yeah.
They get stuck there.
Well, and it's funny. I'm thinking about there's a documentary about the Matrix and how there were a couple times that the movie The Matrix was used in a defense case, where some teen or some person watched The Matrix and then they started watching it like multiple times a day, every day. And then they started to feel like this reality wasn't real. And they went on like rampages basically based on the assumption that like this isn't the real world anymore. And I always thought that was really like when I first heard it, I was like, come on. But then I saw the documentary and, just hearing this one person's interview where they are talking about the descent into, what was going on in their mind. It's like, dude, I mean, I get it, in some respects that you went down that rabbit hole. Um, and I'm curious as to I really loved The Matrix and I watched it a bunch of times, but to go from appreciating it to having it inform your decisions in this reality and in your world
Mm.
and to like take it so far that you lose your groundedness in everything that we know. Um, that's where I don't understand that leap. Um,
Yeah.
you
Well, it
know, because
Everybody.
it's repetition, though, right?
it
Like
must
if you,
be. I mean, that
like,
well, that must be the trance bit that we're still unpacking, because yeah, like he obviously got caught up in something.
and you lose that sort of, you lose your cognitive function, right? So you're not working. You pulling yourself in through. You're narrowing yourself, right? So that world bit is lost, and so why this sort of like you could call it experimental psychology, I guess, or the sort of research becomes very dangerous because you can lose yourself completely and lose that sort of groundedness with no way of coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and I think that's what happened during like the Abu Ghraib trials when they had like the soldiers that were like humiliating and torturing some of the prisoners, and everybody was pointing at those soldiers that did it, calling them like rotten apples and stuff like that. But there was a lot of discussion to say like, well, if they thought it was okay, there was like a culture that was signaling that it was okay. And so starting to dig deeper in like, well, what trance did they get caught up in and what led them there? And this is just from what I remember from like a Senate hearing years ago. But I remember thinking like that was really an interesting way to talk about that kind of stuff because people do get sucked into these situations. And then you think about like group think, like Nick was saying, you have another person giving you the feedback to stay in that trance, or like an alcoholic and they have their buddies and it's like this whole loop that's going on. It's a social thing too. I think a lot of
Mhm.
drinkers, right? It's like the social element that is what's there and they just go to a coffee shop instead. And like they're fine.
Yeah,
Not everybody, but
but
some,
yeah, of course. But you can look at your you can look at your Stanford trial or transfer trials, Stanford experiment, all right, where
Mhm.
this illusion of being a guard and having power over prisoners drove them completely mad, doing things that might have been out of character.
Yeah, all those people that were in that experiment, they were screened ahead of time and given the stamp of like, this is a normal, healthy, law-abiding citizen, you know, and within like a matter of what, 2 weeks,
I
there's
think less. I think it was
like a
like 10
week,
days or
10
something.
days.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just became monstrous. And like
Yeah.
even some of the prisoners in that experiment, they had to be like committed for a period of time because it was so horrible.
Yeah.
There's a really good book about this type of phenomenon. It's called Ordinary Men. And the subject matter is very heavy, so if you're sensitive, you probably shouldn't read it, but
Are we
um,
talking about Weimar Germany?
yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. The police officers in Weimar Germany, and how they were basically their descent into being SS, kill squads. And these were just normal family men, of Germany, and within a span of 5 years, they were executioners.
Yeah.
And it just talks about how the little things that push you a little bit further past your, what you're willing to go. And like it's really fascinating subject material, because it just lets us know that we're all capable of it, because we're all very susceptible, and we're especially susceptible to social pressures. And some people have different thresholds too, like Ayla, you were talking about the guy that went nuts over the Matrix. Like, yeah, for every one person there is of that, there's millions of people who just see that as a good movie. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's like the guy that read Catcher in the shot John Lennon, right? It's like
Mm.
he had an incredibly low threshold of susceptibility. And yeah.
Well, and it's interesting to think about the role of authority figures as well, because there's that other experiment where they would say, if you press this button, you're going to shock the person in
The
the next room.
Milton
Milgram.
experiment.
Yeah.
Milgram.
Milgram.
Okay.
Milgram,
I've
maybe.
been
I don't.
watching a lot of Simpsons, so I just think of Milton.
Yeah.
I have been too. Simpsons, man, it's good stuff. But yeah, but in that experiment, the majority of people, as long as there was a person in like a little coat saying push the button, they
Se-
followed instructions.
75% of the people killed the person. They
Mm.
thought they killed them anyways.
It's the
Yeah.
Nuremberg defense, though, right?
Yeah. Just
Orders
following
are orders.
Yeah.
Well, and then that's weird because like, okay, so there's a meme that's been going around. I think it's because like October's coming, and it was like people, what is it? It's like there's something about like the witches that got burned at Salem, and they're like, how come nobody is scared of the people that set the witches on fire? And it's like because that's potentially everyone. If you look at some of these
Yeah,
psych
it was
studies, it's like,
everybody. And what they don't like to tell you is that there were a lot of women that were pointing at women.
hey, well,
Everybody likes to
actually,
think that it's like, oh, it was these terrible men that burnt women at the stake. Actually, a lot of the women were the ones that turned the other women in.
all right, well, this is a whole other conversation, but I will say that a lot of the witch hunting did get started by men, and specifically, I believe it was a prince that had a wife, and her ship got crashed, so he went to go pick her up. And then when he went to go pick her up, he was like, "Oh, there's this other woman. She clearly must have cursed the ship." And then tortured her until she admitted that she was a witch, and then they killed her. And that's the
Mhm.
other thing about all the stuff back in the day. You can't trust any fucking you can't trust anybody. I mean, everybody was just tortured until they said whatever was wanted to be heard. So like
No one suspects the Spanish Inquisition.
It's pretty useful for torture, though.
was it just the
Like,
Spanish? It was a lot
I
of
know,
different
I know.
people.
That's a Monty Python joke.
Oh, Monty Python.
so I'm going to pull it back a bit before we get bogged down to the, political context of the Salem witch trials and return to trances. Trances.
Trances.
Trances.
Sorry.
I don't. Trances.
I know. I was gonna repeat it again too. It's just gonna go slowed down. Anyway.
I'm going to talk about, I guess, some battle trances, and then we're going to get into a historical example with the Maenads and the Oracle of Delphi. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. So first off are the Spartans. Right, the Spartans were like the first group to use music on the way to battle. They played songs from the flute and sang, which put them into a fearless state for fighting. From at least the 16th century, it was held that march music may induce soldiers marching in unison into trance states, which, according to apologists, don't know, they would band together as a single unit rather than individuals, and the ties between camaraderie and the chain of command are really tight. Thus, this had the effect of making the soldiers automated for the most part. And there's a whole nother argument or conversation about whether consciousness is automated, but it seems like these trance states may be quite automated. And its effect was widely evident in the 16th, 17th, and 18th century with increasing prevalence of firearms employed in warcraft. Military instruments, especially the snare drum and other drums, were used to intone a monotonous, thank you. Posturing at pace of the march and heartbeat. High-pitched fifes, flutes, and bagpipes were used for their piercing effect to play the melody.
Got to get that hemisync, man.
All right, this would
Get the
assist.
hemisync before battle.
This would assist the morale and solidarity of soldiers as they march to battle. So, like that music, that audio driving, that audio driver to induce a battle trance is kind of cool. And I think more recently it was like there's heavy metal being played in tanks. It was there during Desert Storm.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're ever driving and like half asleep and you need to stay up to drive, if you turn on some heavy metal, that'll keep you up and keep you focused.
Oh, it's better with the dubstep, man. Just keeps you going.
Oh god. It reminds me of like that Key and Peele sketch when they're talking about dubstep. Like, just wait for the drop, bro. Just wait for it. Wait for it. And they start to lose their minds.
Because it never comes.
It is odd to me that like we are kind of just like little programmable automatons. Like music seems to be a programming code, at least it's one of the first programming codes that we have. But yeah, it is strange. Yeah.
And what you listen to ends up being really important. It reinforces. It can either reinforce or deconstruct your world, your worldview at least. What else is there? Like, because usually with this sort of things, they use like polyrhythms and polymelodies, I think it is. But it's supposed to have like that hemisync like quality to it, where both your brains line up perfectly, and you kind of just go into that flow state. You're not thinking about losing limbs or possibly dying in battle.
Well, and then think about it too. You're okay. So you're in a march. You're in a battalion of thousands of men, all marching in unison, listening to snare drums that are mimicking heartbeat sounds, and everybody is syncing at the same time. What is that creating on like a fifth dimensional plane? It's creating like a psychic attack. You know what I mean? And it's almost like it's whose psychic attack is stronger. Like I just see it as clouds over the people, like a big, like psychic cloud looms over this marching army as it marches towards their enemy. Yeah.
Well, I also think about, is this the second time on air that I'm referencing Judah Ben-Hur or the Ben-Hur movie?
I think we've mentioned it before, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking about when they're on the boat and the guy's drumming and it's like, and then he's like ramming speed. And so like the beat of the drum is how they're pacing the rowing. And so it makes sense to that if you're marching into battle, you want your troops to stay focused, not think about the worst case scenario, and then you have like a nice steady beat. And then as you want them to run or get hyped up, you would, accentuate that or speed it up or something like that.
Hmm.
Um,
But
yeah.
I even think that they found too when music plays, cells will vibrate at the same rate of the music.
Hmm.
They actually go in sync with the stimuli coming into them. So
That's
that's
why music hypes you up, or
yeah,
makes you sad, or relaxes you. Yeah.
probably why you dance, right? Your body
Hmm.
wants to move with the rhythm of the music.
Well, if you look at brain scans of like a brain at rest and then the brain's reaction to music, like the whole brain will light up. And there's even been a recent semi-recent, this might be a Grey's Anatomy episode, but they base a lot of their stuff on recent studies, so I'm gonna go with it. Where there's a girl in a coma. This is the episode. But she wasn't, they thought she was brain dead, but for some reason, this one doctor had a sense that she wasn't, and then she played music, and that's when they saw the brain start to light up, and it became the way that they were able to reactivate things. So I think that would be kind of interesting to look into, is like the music's ability to, bolster brain function or something like that.
Yeah, there's
It's
there's
such a
a
bizarre phenomenon. But like,
it's
you
pretty
stop and
cool.
think about it. Like, what the hell does that? Why? Why? Why does beating on something make our brains like resonate and our cells move? You know what I mean? Like,
It's just rhythms, those vibrations
yes.
linking up with your brain waves. Those vibrations, those falling
Uh,
nice into sync.
Nick,
There's
remember I was almost dying and the only thing that was coming through was sound. So I don't know, man. I think that like sound exists on other planes
well,
that are beyond
the
physicality.
sound is the first action of the creation of the universe, according to most mythologies and religions.
and
So
also
I mean, it
too, if
makes
you
sense.
just because you can't see doesn't mean you can't hear, right? So it's the one sense that's always helping you out in a way. Because at night in like the middle of the jungle, you can't see anything, but you can
Yeah,
hear everything.
it's true. That's true.
It's always
Oh,
moving on.
and just to corroborate my story from earlier, there are songs that have brought people out of comas.
Yeah, there's this video of this guy who didn't speak or didn't do anything for years, but when he had an iPod on with his favorite music from when he was younger, he would start to move and sing and kind of dance a little bit in his wheelchair. It's like a
Mm.
really heart touching
Oh.
video.
Yeah, they do
Hmm.
that with people who have Alzheimer's as well. A lot of people who have Alzheimer's can still respond to music that they grew up with.
You know? So
And yeah.
that trance state is so heavy, so strong.
Hmm. Very
Ooh,
strong.
I even saw a video. Nick, you sent this to me years ago, like a mariachi band
Yeah, with the
playing
beluga
for
whale.
a beluga whale. And the beluga
Animals love
whale,
music too.
yeah, he was bopping and grooving through that. He looked at one and nodded his head and he looked at it was so pleasant. Like
Hmm.
I
it was
would
just so fun.
not be a happy beluga whale if I ever heard mariachi.
I've had like 3 mariachi songs in me and then yeah, and then I'm like, okay, that's good.
No,
But
it just induces a headache in me. I don't know why.
oh, it was so cute. Oh.
So I want to move on to berserkers because they're known for. I mean, we have the word berserk because of berserkers. So ber just means bear, and berserker means coat because they used to wear bear coats or wolf coats into battle, or sometimes bare chested.
Oh,
They were
so just
known.
very
Right, they were known for being to induce a trance-like state before battle called berserker gong. It is said that this state would give them superhuman strength and make them impervious to pain during battle. So, like, there would be enemy soldiers who would see these people fighting without limbs. It just seems like they were crazy. At one point, one soldier saw a berserker like biting at his shield with his teeth, just like tearing it apart. It just fucking is insane to think about.
goodness. Goodness.
This form of trance could have been induced partially due to their ingestion of Amaceta muscaria, which is like the Super Mario mushroom, their drinking of animal blood,
Oh my
and
god.
the obscene amount of alcohol they would drink before battle.
That helps.
Um, right? But
Nick.
But sadly, like they couldn't always be controlled. Their bloodlust would get so crazy that they would sometimes attack friends' families. It didn't matter anything to satiate that sort of bloodlust mode, which we talked about in the hypnotic state, which this might be
Mhm.
characterized at due to like the sort of external stimuli. If it's not in a controlled environment, it could go crazy. So their controlled environment in this case was just war. But if they were out of war, they would get into this trance state, they would lose their shit without. And this came from a cognitive desire to change themselves into an animal, whether it be a bear or a wolf.
Mhm.
And then some of their more ritualistic practices included having long periods of isolation, a lot of fasting. So imagine you fast a lot and then you drink an obscene amount of alcohol and
Ugh.
mushrooms and animal blood. And then they also had exposure to extreme climates.
Oh, geez. That's a bad recipe.
I mean, it's pretty good if you're going to war, it looks like.
I would not want to be that general. I mean, try wrangling that group. That's worse than wrangling cats, man.
I think you just let them loose and just walk away
Mhm.
from the town.
Yeah,
Just,
you
Yeah, and then
must.
come back 8 hours later.
yeah.
And they're just, pillaging and eating all the sweets.
They're like eating a house.
Yeah.
I know, Nick, the sweets.
Yeah.
Bonbons.
Like bears. They're just
Yeah.
going through the candy store. Oh, but we also see we were talking a little bit about those induction methods. So we see them eating stuff and drinking things, of course, and then the first initial thought of wanting to transform themselves into an animal, right? And then the fasting, again, eating things, isolation. I don't know if you can really say that, and probably lack of socialization might be a good way to induce a trance. Right? You have to be alone, and then
Or
also that
just the
exposure.
the absolute brutality that they would inflict on other people too. It's probably good that you don't have like strong social connections when your
Oh
job is to literally maim and murder.
yeah, and I wonder too. Like, I guess you could. I wonder if it's like a bit of like a centric trance because there's so many things happening on that disassociated plane, right? Like
Mhm.
once you get there,
Yeah,
but they
well,
were
it's like even
revered.
when yeah, well, and even like the Spartans, right? They would go to battle naked. It's
Yeah.
just as it was a part of their meme. It was a part of their like logos, their philosophy, their mythos. Like it did something psychologically to their enemies, and that kind of like lasted.
Oh, for sure. I
Wait,
mean,
who was
it's
that?
Spartans.
Spartans.
They
Yeah.
fought naked?
Yep. Yep.
So did the
Just letting it all hang
berserkers.
out.
Well, I
Kind
can't
of
imagine
wish.
being Norse.
I was just gonna say, I wish that the movie 300 would have like a director's cut that was
Oh
true to
God.
form.
There's, there's an adult version of that film that you can watch.
It's called 300 Cocks.
But everything's at a
Wow.
really wide angle because it's really hard to
Yeah.
get all
It's
300
all
in
in
there.
Zack Snyder's like muted colors and
But
slow
okay,
motion.
Oh,
okay, hold on.
that was the film in the Army of the Dead when they open up that vault.
That's
See those
true.
film canisters?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what that movie
That's what
was.
it
Nick,
was.
you lost me with the slow mo. No,
Yeah. Snyder loves his slow mo, man.
but I was just gonna say, I mean, like, have either of you tried running naked? Like, that just seems
No.
like that wouldn't be supportive.
If I land 1 foot wrong, and I'm gonna be like on the floor from jostling myself.
Do you know how high or at least for the Berserkers, do you know how high they were? I don't think they
Yeah,
cared.
probably not.
And I'm pretty sure the Spartans at least wore sandals.
I think they did wear sandals. Yeah, safety first. You gotta
Yes.
make sure you don't want to step
Okay.
on a rock.
But I mean, like, right, exactly. I'm just saying, though, I would imagine that there would be some support needed.
No,
Honestly,
you'll be
if I
fine.
was fighting a Spartan, I'd just grab his nuts.
As long as your balls don't hit the leg, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
I mean, you're marching in group. It's not like a chart. They had the little phalanx, right? They were marching as a single unit. They weren't just like
Running
at
speed.
you.
Okay,
Yeah.
see, that's where my mind went with like them
I'd just
running
run
full
at them with
speed.
a cigar cutter. There you go.
think those are invented at that point, but no, I mean, yeah, no. It just seemed like you would want some kind of armor, but at the same time, the fact that you don't think you need that does play kind of a mind game
Uh-huh.
for your
Yeah.
opponents
What do you see when you see like 1,000 naked dudes running at you?
with
What do you-
spears.
yeah.
Yeah, they're just insane. Like, look at
Right.
these. We're supposed to be fighting a war, and there's naked people running at me
Yeah.
or marching in unison.
They were the original shirts versus skins.
Oh dear.
Anyways.
Now that we've learned both of your fantasies, we're gonna move on to some oracles of Delphi and the main acts, which end up being, which like they're priestesses that would go under crazy amounts of trances, but they might have been working in the same temple. Interestingly enough, so one was in service to Apollo. This is the Pythia, the Oracle of Delphi. And basically, this temple was in service to Apollo after he killed a python. I think we've talked about this before too, or briefly, a long time ago. But this was sort of Pythia was known for these like cryptic, enigmatic messages that she would give to kings, noblemen, and generals. Basically, if you wanted to do anything, if you wanted to start a war, if you wanted to make an alliance, if you wanted to have like a diplomatic marriage, you would go to the oracle and figure out if it was right or not. And so you would go up, pay your tribute, ask a question, and then they would go down into the subterranean part of this temple where there's these cracks in the ground and fumes came up. Mythologically speaking, is where the python's decaying body was. And the priestess would breathe in this gas and fumes and start to be able to prophesize. And as she started speaking words, the other priest would start to write down sort of like what she was saying and then return it back to the person asking for advice. And even if this advice, like most of the time, it was pretty prophetic, it was pretty on point, but even times when it wasn't, it was chalked up to some like misinterpretation. Go centuries.
Likely story.
Yeah, right. Centuries later, after the Christians come around and shut everything down, and even fast forward more to like modern times, because they would shut it down thinking it was a site of superstition. They didn't actually believe that there was fumes of a giant dragon underneath the ground. They found out that there was actually that this temple sat on a fault and would release hallucinogenic gases.
Yeah.
And with a certain aesthetic, you can start to describe things in prophetic ways. Apollo being the god of prophecy, that's why it was in service to him, of course. So it sort of all makes sense. So they were using this trance state to reach out into the future for divination.
It's
And
weird. Did they tell you what? Did they say what gas is it? Is like carbon monoxide?
no, it may have been. I wouldn't be too like. I don't know what gases are common out of a fault line.
Right.
But
sulfur.
But if you have oxygen deprivation or nitrogen narcosis, then it makes like that. You could just be getting high off of that or the lack of oxygen.
One of them was ethylene, which has a sweet smell and produces a narcotic effect described as floating or disembodied euphoria.
Bro, the Greeks knew how to party. Jeez Louise. You believe it though? Like they literally had a temple where some chick just sat on a fault line and inhaled like gases from the earth.
And then
she just
gave you
got
prophetic
really
messages.
Gave you prophetic messages that were sometimes right. Like what?
Most
the
of
hell?
the time, right?
Most of the time, yeah.
There's a National Geographic article about Delphi Oracle's lips may have been loosened by gas vapors.
Yeah.
What I found quite cool though on the column of this temple too, they had some words of general advice. Is know thyself, nothing to excess, and surety brings ruin. And it was also interesting that the temple was only opened the 9 months out of the year, the 9 of the warmest months. Once winter came around, they said that Apollo had left the temple and that Dionysus had returned to the temple.
No more gas.
Probably. There's just no earthquakes, no faults actually
Right.
happening in winter months. And that kind of brings me up next to the main ads. And then we could kind of talk about both of these and go back and forth after this.
Oh, you kept
Um,
saying mainads. I kept thinking that you were saying that'll bring us to the main act, and I was like, "Oh, he's gonna bring it back to the red door. Oh, it's gonna be good." Maenads. Okay.
or do you like nymphs? Nymphs might be beyond the red door.
Oh.
Uh, Maenads were female worshippers of Dionysus, the Greek god of mystery, wine, and intoxication. The word literally translates to the raving ones. They were known as wild, insane women who could not be reasoned with. The mysteries of Dionysus inspired women to ecstatic frenzy. They indulge in copious amounts of violence, bloodletting, sexual activity, self intoxication, and mutilation, and also dancing. They were usually pictured as crowned with vine leaves, clothed in fawn skins, and carrying thyrsus? Thyrsus? I don't know. It's like a stick with a pine cone at the end, and dancing with wild abandon. They were characterized as entranced women wandering through forests and hills. The term has become known associated with a wide variety of women's supernatural, mythological, and historical associations with the god of Dionysus himself and his worship. In the realm of the supernatural, is a category of nymphs who nursed and took care of the young Dionysus, who later grew up and became the leaders of the Maenads, who might be beyond that red door, depending on how you want to get into your trance-like state.
Every time I hear the word Maynad, I think of True Blood and that one character, the Maynad, the lady that takes in all of the wayward people in the town, and then everybody just starts partying every night, and they can't remember what they're doing in the morning.
And they go crazy.
They go crazy.
Don't they start killing people or something?
Yeah.
Like that?
Oh yeah.
They get killed.
Yep. Yeah, they all just get really possessed by the Maynad and just start, having giant orgies and killing each other and drinking and all that stuff. Yeah, good times.
Yeah, that's exactly the worship of Dionysus. You were right. The Greeks do know how to party.
Yeah, seriously.
Don't forget those pine cones, though.
Yeah, the Thyrsus, which is I think that when we had our talk about the third eye, we mentioned the Thyrsus actually.
Yeah.
Which is one of the wands with the pine cones on it.
The pineal gland.
Pineal gland, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which also, creates your quote unquote reality, right? Your holographic reality. So what I found interesting is that there are connections from priestesses that served as in the Temple of Delphi or Delphi or however you wish to pronounce it, that would actually serve in the sacred rites or the secret sacred rites of Dionysus as well, that were also Maenads. So you have this very early on, this you sit there and hell gas and become prophetic, and you're guiding literally a nation in a weird way, right? You're deciding whether you should go to war, what alliances should be made, and then during the winter time you just go crazy and start partying and doing both good and, I guess, I don't want to say good and bad, but you behave far differently, right?
Yeah, altruism versus hedonism.
Yeah, and you reach that state of madness, and then you have Nietzsche talk about this division in all of us that we have, that we're both Apollonian and Dionysian, and that's how we interact, and at least in the very basics of personalities, that's how you can see the two interacting together within every single person.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff.
And I think it becomes a trance.
Well, and it does become a trance, and I think it's also interesting, just the association with the seasons as well, the cyclical nature of it all, the need to purge and sort of indulge. And I think it's interesting that the indulgence period is only a quarter of the year, whereas the rest of the year is more dedicated to the oracle. But it's that need for the psyche to kind of cut loose and enact its craziest fantasies.
Yeah, that's why I think like when we were talking about that mind time connection, like
Mm.
it's not you don't I don't think you build that time debt when you daydream. I think you need that sort of because that's a very light version of you know
Hmm. Indulgence.
yes.
Hmm.
And you need that sort of stuff to you maybe even get into the trance of a flow state to do the work required in the name of Apollo or something, you know?
Indeed. Yeah. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Ayla, you have anything on that? Yes. Real fascinating over there.
I
Are
think
we, are
Ayla's gone.
we all, is she going into a trance?
She disappeared.
I was on mute.
Oh, okay.
I was talking and I was like, damn, Nick is just interrupting me. And then I
I'm
was
so
like,
sorry.
no, but you weren't because you couldn't hear me.
No.
And over here, I was like trying not to be salty about it on the air. And then you guys were like, Ayla? And I'm like, oh.
Silly me.
That's so silly. But yeah, no, I was thinking about what you were saying, Mike, about like the mind and time connection. And there are some studies out there that talk about the importance of fallow time when it comes to creativity. So, in the sense that, like, we are in a trance, we wake up and first thing we're doing is, the trance of coffee or the trance of the commute. Then you're at work and you're in like the workflow state. Then you go home, you're cooking, then you're on Netflix. And they talk about how you really need time to literally do nothing. And like by fallow time, it's like laying in a field watching clouds or laying in bed doing nothing. Like those times are actually, there's something happening in the brain where it's doing background work that's necessary for like creativity and fresh ideas to abound. Um, so yeah, for whatever that's worth.
Hmm.
It's pretty cool. That makes sense.
Yeah, well, and I was just thinking about it in terms of like, what you were talking about, in terms of just like, would you accumulate time debt or not? Even if you did, if doing nothing is what causes us on a conscious level to jump ahead creatively or just consciously, then, what what does that imply as to how we would spend our time? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Well, I mean, you need time in your like parasympathetic nervous system, right? You need time just to relax because it gives you that instead of like that weird work addiction thing I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It that time off to do nothing and just stare at the sky or just literally fuck off and do anything.
Fuck
Um,
off. Which is what we
is
call it derogatorily, but like it's important to fuck off. It really
yeah,
is.
you have to from time to time, but you can go meditate, relax, and you instead of just working away, grinding away, and doing things in a maybe in an inefficient way, you can daydream and end up finding a better, more efficient way to do your work thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have that time off, then you kind of get stuck in that loop.
Oh, it's true. I remember I was working a lot of hours and then I started to pare it back. And a part of me was like, gosh, I really should work harder and work longer to get ahead on this and that. But then over and over, I would find that if I did a shorter day, and let's say I end my day and I had 20 tasks that would have taken me like another 4 hours. If I wait until the next day, I can get those 20 things done in like an hour. Like it's just like you just need that time to refresh and yeah, like you said, you figure out a better way to attack it.
Yeah, and that's true for like for even trying to find a movie on Netflix, right? That hunting expedition. What movie should I watch? If you
Yeah,
step
Nick.
away from Netflix and just chill out, you might be able to go back like I'm going to watch this one versus
It's
the
not my
endless
fault they have
scrolling.
shit.
You know what though? I think it's the algorithms because I started having movies pop up into my head that I was like, "Oh, I want to watch that movie." And then like it would be on there, but it never got recommended and it was never like there's thousands of movies on these things. So yeah.
No, no, it's a lot of hunting to dig through.
Uh-huh.
But lastly, I kind of want to go back to terminating the a trance, right? So we've kind of established that these trances can be created without knowledge or intent of creating them, right? Like they can be created with intent or knowledge, but you don't even need to know they exist, and you can just create them yourselves. We do this all the time, right? As Ayla was talking about the trance state that we get into when drinking coffee, or the workflow state, blah blah blah. But to terminate them, we actually have to know what's going on, because you can't. The mind doesn't know what the eye cannot see. Right? If you can't see it, you can't terminate it. Simple trances are pretty easy. These are like meditative trances. There's only one cognitive loop happening, as I stated before. There's no like secondary loop going on. If there are secondary loops, uh, that the primary loop is terminated, and then secondary loops will reestablish the primary loop. This was the example with the case of the alcoholic with the unresolved, unrealized emotional trauma. You can stop drinking, but that trauma is still going to make you establish some sort of primary loop, whether that's drinking, or if you go to AA and find some sort of a religious loop, then that religious loop gets established. So it becomes insanely important to realize what's going on with these loops that are generating these trances. Cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Mhm.
I like it.
All right. Well then, if there's nothing else, I'm gonna do my thing to end the thing, and then I'll pass it over to you, Nick.
Mm-hmm. Do it to it.
All right, Ayla. Anything else? Are you on mute? Don't be on mute.
I'm not on mute. No. No, I love it. What a great episode, and I love the way that you kind of bring it, full circle. It reminds me of teaser. I think the next show I will be working on is going to be on the Ouija board. Because I just watched the movie Ouija, and but what I liked about it was they were talking about these rules for how to exit, and one of them is that you have to always say goodbye at the end. And even with what you were reading here, it's just interesting to think about like rules for entering and exiting, and that creates a sort of level of auspiciousness, I think, and to what level that mimics ceremony, where there are certain rules of engagement, and that observation becomes a vehicle to cement what is happening.
Yeah, those rules are quite important. From whether it be Ouija rituals, or ceremonies, or even this trances.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna close this.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4. Close the red door. All right, that's it. That's all I got, Nick.
Super duper. Thanks so
You
much.
were in a trance the whole time. No, I was kidding.
Wait, where am I?
Right. Yeah,
Who am I?
exactly. Well, thanks, man. That was a fantastic episode. I thought it was fascinating, and I think anybody listening or listening in the future will find it fascinating as well. So thank you, Mike, for bringing that to our conversation table.
And if you
That's
don't
a-
like it, you're dumb. No,
That's a long one. Did we talk about trans? Are we live?
Yeah,
Where
we're still
am I?
going. We're still going. Yeah.
Who
Thank
am
you
I?
so
Hello?
much. Thank you.
Hello?
Thank you so much. I'm trying to close it out myself here, guys. Thank you so much for listening. We very much appreciate it. Please consider giving us a thumbs up and perhaps a subscription to our YouTube page. We are 2 away from 30 subscribers. We cannot wait. Please, if you have not subscribed yet, please consider doing so. It would make our day. For certain, it would. I would like to say that we have our next episode Monday at 8 p.m. I believe that's going to be on me, and I'll just give you guys the hint for the next week. Next week episode will be on human sacrifice.
Ooh.
That's been one I've been kind of toying around with in my head, and I figured, I might as well just start it.
That's the hint?
It's not a hint. It's a teaser.
Oh.
Sorry.
I was going to say,
My
geez,
brain
what
is starting to melt. So I'm fumbling my words right now. But so we'll be talking about human sacrifice next week, next Monday at 8 p.m. at ExoFathom. Please consider giving our Facebook page a thumbs up, a subscription. Leave us a comment if you like, if you have any feedback, if you want us to cover anything in future episodes. We are always open to suggestion. Yeah, thank you so much, you guys, for listening. And we hope that you have a wonderful evening or whenever you are listening to this. And until next time, Cognonauts, you stay out there and we will catch you on the next Exofathom. Good night.
Peace.
Later.